The next person is Lucy. I met Lucy one-on-one only for the first time a few weeks ago. She's very passionate, idealistic, and in a very positive way on sustainability, climate change, fairness, and also intergenerational fairness. And she's concerned if IFoA should not be too behind the curve in terms of rethinking the foundations of our work, which is currently on neoclassical economics. Yeah, she has an abiding concern about that, and we have been in that space before, about 25 years ago, of being too slow to respond to changes around us. As you can see from the slide, she is qualified as a vet as well as an actuary. She works in Aviva today, concentrating on climate risks and opportunities. She will be the next chair for the IFoA Sustainability Board. Now she's doing work for Sustainability Development Goals, and she co-chairs the Intergenerational Fairness Working Party. And she's also a member of the Economic Members Interest Group. So with this, I will hand over the floor to Lucy Saye.
Thank you, Suee, for inviting me to speak today, and what a great intro there from Ashok. I'm going to build on and hopefully complement some of the things that we've spoken about this week. And probably unsurprisingly, I'm going to touch on some sustainability aspects to highlight our collective failures in recognising social and environmental outcomes in our definition of economic success, including what this means for intergenerational fairness. So it's increasingly recognised that economic performance is underpinned by what we call ecosystem services or benefits. It might be natural resources like food, raw materials or medicine, or it could be intermediate processes like pollination or nutrient cycling, or equally the breakdown of our waste products, so carbon storage, biological breakdown or removing pollutants. But one thing's for sure, that these things allow our societies and our economies to function. We also get social and cultural benefits from nature, so access to green space is important for physical and mental health. And nature often has a role in arts, culture, and spiritual practices. But despite these benefits, we've been pretty bad at recognising them in the role of generating economic activity. And I'm just going to touch on some of the reasons why. So many of these services don't have a market price, and something picked up by Mark Carney in his first week lecture was the movement in economics to a subjective theory of value in which value is equated with price. And of course, in the case of nature, it means we don't reflect the true costs in our economic valuations. There's the added complication of a delay. Nature can withstand quite a lot, so soils can degrade whilst crop yields stay the same for some time. Carbon can continue to be emitted long before temperatures increase, and the exact point at which these services are undermined beyond repair is uncertain. And then the damages we do experience are unequally distributed, and that means that those who are often responsible are not the ones feeling the most severe impacts. And this could be a consequence of geography, or it might be on an intergenerational basis, or it could be as a result of the structural inequalities of society as pre-existing vulnerabilities interact and weaken resilience. Together, this means we collectively overuse both nature's sources and sinks, and this is amplified when we fail to recognise the degradation of the natural environment in our assessment of economic performance. But what this means is that we undermine the resilience of our economies, and we impair the ability of future generations to share in these same benefits. So clearly these are issues that are relevant for the public interest, but what can actuaries do about it? Well, in short, every economic activity is financed by someone, and a large proportion of economic activity is insured by someone. And a great many of these organisations rely on actuaries assessing economic outcomes to make decisions. Many of these organisations have a long-term focus, which means they're unable to diversify away such large-scale negative externalities because the impacts are borne across the entire economy. And together, this means that these institutions and the actuaries that work in them have an incentive, and an ability to act. Whilst of course not overstating our influence, our skill set is well suited to the assessment, management, and perhaps most importantly, communication of complex long-term risks. And I'd support previous speakers in this series in embracing a broader perspective. As actuaries, we rely on economic theories and techniques, and I've just outlined some of the limitations in relation to environmental challenges, and others in this events programme have outlined some of the ongoing key debates in this field. For me, one of the biggest failures has been the lack of emphasis on economic pluralism. There isn't only one way to do economics, but so often it's presented as a set of facts free from any external influences like politics or philosophy, which of course isn't true, and it limits our ability to solve problems in the real world. So one of the things we can do as actuaries is recognise different economic schools of thought and work to understand the insight and the limitations that they bring with them. Additionally, we need to think of true pluralism as stretching across discipline. So what insights can we get from anthropology, from history, from ecology, from systems thinking? How does this impact, and how is it impacted by politics, regulation, and the law? And this involves questioning and challenging the underlying economic assumptions in our models, what is in our models, what is not, what are all of the costs and benefits, even if they don't have monetary values, what are the impacts on society both now and in the future. Something else for us to consider is uncertainty, which has been another theme running through this series of events. And it's particularly important in the case of climate change and biodiversity loss, where there's radical uncertainty, complexity, and irreversibility or tipping points. It's also relevant in the case of innovation, where spillovers add to the uncertainty of outcomes. And a recent example of quite a nice positive spillover is the RNA technology that has been used in the COVID-19 vaccines, which is now being built on to develop a vaccine for malaria. So whilst that's a positive externality, such a benefit is unlikely to have been captured as part of a traditional cost-benefit analysis. So in these situations, we need to think about what this means for our models and decision-making. How do we account for spillovers? How might we deal with a change in the structure of the economy as we decarbonise? And collectively, as a society, it requires a recognition that environmental and social outcomes are not separate from our economic outcomes. We need to find ways of evaluating all three together. This was picked up in the Dasgupta review on biodiversity commissioned by the Treasury and discusses the concept of inclusive wealth. So human capital, produced capital, and natural capital. And this recognition is certainly welcome. Lastly, we should recognise that there isn't something innate in markets that means environmental or social damage is inevitable. Markets are man-made systems. It's people with our underlying values, morals, and biases that write the laws, regulation, governance structures that deliver those outcomes. If we want different outcomes, if we want sustainable outcomes, we need to think about how we achieve that. I appreciate that's quite a lot of information. I'll pause there and let people reflect and hand back to Chieh.
Thanks very much, Lucy. And you cover quite important ground. And reflection is actually quite a good phrase. Yeah. And as you were speaking, two thoughts came to my mind, and I think we are going to return to this. Yesterday, it was John Kay actually, so it's 2 days ago. He says about mankind's need to calculate, to measure, and a great desire to put a number on it. Yeah, and our profession is built on that, right? But now we are saying that we should maybe be more aware of other ways of measurement. And in our own conversation, you talked about well-being and social well-being as alternative measures. What does it mean to us as actually is actually very profound. And I see this not necessarily as negative, but actually as an opportunity to really go to a higher order about what is it meant to have good outcomes, right? Because currently good outcomes are basically measured by prices and GDP, which you and Mark Carney and are saying is inadequate.